World War II changed warfare forever. From the terrifying MG42 and versatile MG34 to the powerful Browning M2, Vickers, and Soviet DSHK. These machine guns dominated the battlefield. Let's explore the most powerful machine guns of World War II. MG34. Germany introduced this gun in 1934, and it changed the way armies thought about machine guns entirely. Before the MG34, most military forces kept their heavy guns in fixed positions and their light guns with infantry squads. The MG34 was designed to do both jobs. It could be mounted on a bipod for mobile use or placed on a heavy tripod for sustained fire. It fired at around 800 to 900 rounds per minute and fed from belt ammunition or drum magazines. Soldiers respected it for its versatility, but maintaining it in mud and sand was a serious challenge. It was expensive and slow to manufacture, which pushed Germany to look for something better as the war expanded. MG42. Germany rolled this out in 1942 as a direct answer to the MG34's production problems. It was simpler, cheaper, and faster to make, using stamped metal parts instead of machined components. What made it truly stand out was its rate of fire. It could fire up to 1,200 rounds per minute, a speed that gave it a distinctive tearing sound on the battlefield. Allied soldiers described it as sounding like ripping cloth or canvas. That sound became feared across every front where German forces fought. The MG42 was so effective that its basic design influenced machine gun development for decades after the war ended, and variants of it are still in service with some militaries today. M1917 Browning. The United States brought this water-cooled heavy machine gun into the Second World War, having originally designed it near the end of the First. John Browning developed it, and it proved so reliable that the Army held onto it through the interwar years and into the 1940s. It used a water jacket around the barrel to prevent overheating during prolonged firing, which made it well suited for defensive positions and fixed emplacements. It fired the standard .30-06 Springfield cartridge from a 250-round cloth belt. American forces used it across the Pacific and European theaters, often setting it up on tripods to cover approach routes and fortified positions. M1919 Browning. This was the air-cooled counterpart to the M1917, developed to give infantry units a machine gun they could actually carry and move with more easily. Removing the water jacket made it lighter, though it still needed careful barrel management during extended use. It came in several variants, including versions mounted on vehicles, aircraft, and fortifications. The M1919A4 became the most common ground version, standard across American infantry units throughout the war. It fired the same .30-06 cartridge as the M1917 and fed from a metal or fabric belt. Simple, dependable, and easy to train soldiers on, it became one of the defining weapons of the American ground forces in the conflict. M2 Browning. Few weapons in the entire war matched this one for raw impact. Chambered in .50 BMG, a cartridge specifically developed to defeat light armor and aircraft, the M2 was heavy, large, and devastatingly powerful. It weighed around 84 pounds without its mount, which meant it needed a vehicle or a sturdy fixed platform to be used effectively. From the beginning of American involvement, it appeared on tanks, half-tracks, ships, aircraft, and ground emplacements. Its range and penetration power gave it authority against everything from infantry to light armored vehicles to low-flying planes. John Browning designed it in the late 1910s and early 1920s, and it was already proven before the war began. It remains in service with dozens of militaries to this day, which is a remarkable statement about how well it was designed. Vickers Machine Gun. Britain's primary heavy machine gun of the war was a weapon with roots stretching back to before the First World War. Based on the original Maxim design, the Vickers used a water-cooled system similar to the M1917 and was known above almost everything else for its reliability. There are accounts of Vickers guns firing hundreds of thousands of rounds over extended periods with minimal stoppages. It was chambered in .303 British and fed from a 250-round canvas belt. British and Commonwealth forces deployed it in North Africa, Italy, and Northwest Europe, as well as across the Pacific and Indian theaters. It was heavy and slow to move, but in a fixed defensive role it was almost without equal. Maxim M1910. The Soviet Union relied on this aging but proven design throughout the entire war. Originally derived from Hiram Maxim's 19th-century invention, the Russian variant had been updated and adopted before the First World War and stayed in production and service for decades. It was water-cooled, fed from a 250-round belt, and mounted on a distinctive two-wheeled Sokolov carriage that allowed it to be pulled across terrain quickly. Soviet forces used it extensively during the desperate defensive battles of 1941 and 1942, and it remained on the front lines even as newer weapons became available. Its age was a limitation in terms of weight and complexity, but its durability made it valuable when supply lines were unreliable and maintenance was difficult. MG43 Gorionov. The Soviet military recognized by the early 1940s that it needed something more modern than the Maxim. The Gorionov answered that need. Introduced in 1943, it was lighter than the Maxim, air-cooled, and designed with battlefield practicality in mind. It fired the same 7.62 x 54 mmR cartridge as the Maxim and used a similar wheeled mount, which helped ease the transition for soldiers already familiar with the older weapon. The timing of its introduction coincided with the Soviet counteroffensives that began pushing German forces westward, so it saw heavy use during the most aggressive phase of Soviet operations in the Eastern Front. It was a straightforward, functional weapon that proved well suited to the conditions of that theater. DSHK. When the Soviet forces needed something equivalent to the American M2 Browning, they had this. The DSHK fired a 12.7 by 108 mm round, a heavy cartridge designed to penetrate armor and destroy aircraft. It entered service in the late 1930s and became increasingly important as the war progressed and air power grew more decisive. Soviet ground forces mounted it on vehicles and used it in anti-aircraft roles defending supply columns and infantry positions. Like the M2 Browning, it sat in a class above standard machine guns, offering a level of destructive power that smaller caliber weapons simply could not match. It remained in widespread use long after the war ended, another example of a wartime design that proved too effective to retire. Type 92. Japan's primary heavy machine gun had an unusual feature that set it apart from most others in the war. Rather than feeding from a continuous belt, it used short metal strips holding 30 rounds each. A trained crew could feed these strips quickly one after another, but any disruption to that rhythm could slow the gun's effectiveness. It fired a 7.7 mm round and was mounted on a distinctive tripod with curved legs. Allied soldiers in the Pacific encountered it regularly and noted that it made a distinctive, slow rhythmic sound when firing, which earned it the nickname Woodpecker among American troops. It was reliable and accurate, but the strip feed system was considered a drawback compared to belt-fed alternatives used by other major powers. Type 3 Machine Gun. This was an earlier Japanese heavy machine gun, chambered in 6.5 mm and based partly on the French Hotchkiss design. Japan had adopted the Hotchkiss concept during the Russo-Japanese War and refined it into the Type 3, which served through much of the interwar period and into the Second World War. Like the Type 92 that eventually replaced it in the heavy role, it used the strip feed system. The 6.5 mm cartridge was considered underpowered by the time the wider war began, but guns chambered for it remained in service because Japan faced severe logistical pressures and could not simply retire functional weapons. It appeared most often in secondary theaters and defensive positions where older equipment was still put to use. Hotchkiss M 1914. France entered the war with this veteran weapon still in widespread service. Designed before the First World War, it had proven itself across years of trench warfare in that earlier conflict and remained in French military inventories into the 1940s. It was an air-cooled, tripod-mounted gun that also used metal feed strips rather than belts. After France fell in 1940, significant stocks of Hotchkiss guns were captured and used by German occupation forces and passed to Allied and occupied nations. Some appeared as late as 1944 and 1945 in various secondary theaters. It was a product of an earlier era, but its service life extended far beyond what its designers might have anticipated. ZBVZ. 37. Czechoslovakia developed this heavy machine gun in the late 1930s, and after the German occupation of Czechoslovakia in 1939, Germany seized production and incorporated it into their own inventory under the designation MG37. It fired the 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser cartridge, the same round used by other German weapons, which made logistics relatively straightforward. It was a belt-fed, air-cooled weapon capable of sustained fire and was used by German and collaborating forces across multiple theaters. The Czechoslovak design tradition that produced it also gave rise to the ZB-26, which directly influenced the British Bren gun, showing how much influence Czech firearms engineers had on the broader wartime landscape. MG08. Germany never fully retired this First World War relic. The original Maxim-based heavy machine gun of the Imperial German Army was still present in German hands when the Second World War began, used by occupation forces, second-line units, and fortification garrisons. Water-cooled and mounted on its heavy sled mount, it was cumbersome and outdated by 1939 standards. German forces did not rely on it for frontline offensive operations, but its presence in storage depots and training establishments meant it occasionally appeared in combat through necessity. It represents how even the most advanced military powers of the era entered the war still carrying weapons designed for a completely different kind of conflict.